it in the chat. So, without further ado, let's start. Greetings to all the lecturers and the students here today. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Lutfia, and you can call me Fia, and I'll be today's moderator as we have a guest lecture today. Before we start, let's hope everything went well and everyone to here to gain insightful informations. As our guest here will provide a perspective on application of data science with the topic of how data moves us, data science at Essex, and hidden mathematics of animal behavior. So, before that, I will list you guys the rundown today. We'll begin with the opening speech from Prof. Didi, and then followed by material from our guest lecturer, Dr. Bailey, for more or less 1 hour, and then followed by Q&A sessions for 30 minutes. Okay, first we will be hearing from a brief opening speech from Prof. Didi, Head of Statistics Department.
Thank you very much, Via. Nice to meet you, Joy. Yeah, we met last year when I visited Essex. Yeah, good morning for you because it is 8 a.m. in the UK time, and then good afternoon all the student of Bachelor of Statistics, Bachelor of Data Science, as well as Master of Statistics, and probably there are doctoral student of Statistics. And also some lecturer here, Bu Dias, Bu Sophie, and also Christabel. Nice to meet you again, Christabel. Yeah. Uh, we are very happy to have you here, Joe, for the online international guest lecture, where, as you know, that our bachelor student, we have bachelor in statistics and bachelor in data science, and we have a double degree where three of our bachelor in statistics IUP class already graduated from this double degree program actually in the last July. And also we expect that other of our student interested in join this double degree and then can continue with get the data science degree from the Essex University. For the student who are here, please have a good opportunity to know better what Essex University offer, and then please be prepare your question, whatever it is about academic or it is about the material itself or about the program. Please feel free to give question to the Joe, and maybe Christabel also can help to give more detail to the question. Okay, without further ado, I give the time back to the Via to the next session. Thank you very much, everybody.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Didi. Let's move on to our guest. Let me introduce you guys, Dr. Joseph Bailey. Thank you for your time today, Dr. Bailey.
That's quite all right. Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, so everyone, let me introduce you a bit about Dr. Bailey. Dr. Bailey is a lecturer in University of Essex, located in the United Kingdom, and have been teaching for quite a while in this area of expertise, which his background are full on mathematics, from bachelor to PhD on mathematical biology. His area of interest are along the line of mathematical biology, individual and group movement, random walk theory, movement and time series data analysis. And I'm sure Dr. Bailey right here have many things that are insightful to share to the classmates here today. So today's topic will be around data science at Essex, if I'm not wrong, and dive deeper into hidden mathematics of animal behavior. We encourage you all, the students, to pay attention and feel free to discuss if any question wanted to be asked about the lecture. So, Dr. Bailey, you have around the time around for 1 hour, and then we will have a Q&A sessions after. However, for the participants, if you want to ask a question during the presentation, you can send to the chat box and we will gather it and ask them during the Q&A sessions. But if you want to ask directly, you may raise your hand during the Q&A session through the Zoom, or if you guys, the UTM students below, you can raise your hand and then the committee will give you a microphone. So without further ado, I do not want to waste your time, Dr. Billy, so I'll give you the time and floor.
Right. Well, thank you very much. And that's a very kind introduction. It's very nice for you to invite me, to have me here. As I said, it is nice and early in the UK, but got a nice coffee, so that should be fine. If at any time you can't hear me or don't quite understand me, please just put something in the chat or raise your hand, and that will be fine, and I can go over things. It's always hard to tell how clear things are on Zoom, so if you've got any problems, just let me know. My talk today is kind of in two parts. So I think as it's been excellently introduced, I'll talk a bit about data science at Essex. So that includes the degrees we offer, the undergraduate degree in data science. I will talk a bit about the work that my colleagues do in the department, as well as across the whole university. So hopefully to give you a really good idea how important data science is to the University of Essex, and not just for us mathematicians and statisticians, but actually for people from a wide range of backgrounds. Then I'll move on and talk a little bit about my actual research. So that will be a bit of a general overview. And if anyone's interested in a little bit more about that topic, which hopefully some people will be, by all means, again, ask plenty of questions. I'm happy to respond to as many questions as we can. Now, I'm hoping to keep it just under an hour, but I am an academic, so we can talk for quite a lot, and I do have lots of slides to go through. So occasionally I will probably just go through some slides quite quickly. And again, if anyone's interested, then we can go through them at the end. But also I'm happy to send everything round. So through Christabel or the organisers from ITS, I'm happy to send that to you and you to forward the slides on to the students if at any point. Good, so I think I'm going to attempt to share my screen. Oh, right. Is it possible for me to send, right, I'll send a request to share my screen.
Okay, wait, I think we will set the settings first.
That's all right. So I just got, so yes, the main,
All good.
I'll start. Are we happy? Okay, I can talk about myself a bit. There we go. Right.
Okay.
Sorry, I should have confirmed that. So can we all see, hopefully, my screen saying the introduction to the talk? So we're data science at Essex, and hopefully there's even a nice laser pointer. Can we see that? I'd assume so. Good. All right. So this is me. So I'm Dr. Joe Bailey. I'm in the School of Mathematics, Statistics, Natural Science, which is quite a nice long name. But you'll notice data science isn't included in the name, but we do focus on data science as well. We just didn't want to make the name even longer and more complicated. Now, this is kind of roughly what I'm hoping the talk is going to cover. There's lots of things that we can go through. So I want to talk about what we understand as data science at the University of Essex, how we teach it, and then also what we kind of research in as data scientists. It's such a broad field, such an exciting topic and field to be in. There's lots of different things people can do. Right, but first of all, I'll talk about me because I am me, so I know a lot about it, about that subject. I did my undergraduate degree in mathematics at Warwick, which is in the UK. I then took a couple of years. I actually had a few jobs. I tried to have a proper job for a while. I then decided I wanted to go back into research, into education. So I went to study for my MSc at the University of London. And again, that was in mathematics. I did that part-time actually, which is something that perhaps sometimes isn't known as an option. You can study degrees, certainly master's degrees at part-time if you'd like, certainly in the UK. So that took me a couple of years. I enjoyed that. It meant I got to work full-time and study, and I was living in London, so I was very happy with that. Then after I finished my MSc, I decided that actually I would really like to start developing my own research. So I luckily got a place to do my PhD at the University of Essex, which hopefully you recognise the title. So I've stayed there ever since. That was in mathematical biology. And then I completed that at the end of 2019, 2020. And then I ended up getting a lectureship at the university as well. So I'm now a fully fledged lecturer at the university since 2019. And that's in the mathematics department. Now you'll notice there that I have pretty much done maths, and more maths. There's no focus there on statistics or data science. However, since my PhD, when I started actually having to do some active research in the field, and you'll see a bit more about that towards the end of the talk. That's when I really actually had to start actually using data. And I must admit, before I did that, I wasn't very good at statistics. I didn't understand or like statistics that much, and I wasn't very good at coding. But it wasn't until I started actually getting hands-on with data, really figuring out why I needed to analyze it, how I wanted to analyze it, what results I was trying to get out. That's when it really started making sense to me. So now I kind of mix between the two. So I have a lovely little slide here just to try and show off that I do some maths. This is some complicated looking maths that I've got in my most recent publication. It's not as complicated as it seems. It's just maths, so we make it look complicated. But then, of course, hopefully we all recognize something like this. So this is a linear regression, and I do lots of these types of things in my research as well. So I do flip between the two. But certainly my expertise and my knowledge in all things data has come from my background of mathematics and my research into mathematical biology. Right. So now that's, enough of a list. That's just about me. That's my lovely background. Essex. This is perhaps the more important thing, is where is Essex? So hopefully we all recognise this is a map of the UK. Now I would ask, but it's a bit hard because I can't see people's hands up, but does anyone know on this where Essex would be? I'm going to assume maybe not. Does anyone know an important place in the UK? Well, and in England, let's just say England, because obviously Scotland and Wales may say differently. Probably the most famous place in the whole of England would be London. Now, London is based here. Hopefully you can see my pointer. This is where London is. Essex is just here. So we're right next door to London. So this is the centre of London. The University of Essex is located in Colchester, which is just here. So that's quite nice. That means we're very, very close to the centre of London. It's easy to get in and out of the city. We're also close to the coast. So we do have some nice beaches around here, which is quite nice. So occasionally when it is sunny in England, and it is sunny occasionally, it's nice to go on some beaches around here. But the university has lovely access to the main cities of London, and also we can head up to somewhere called Norwich. But it's a very nice place to be. I should also say that I am actually from Essex. I was born in Chelmsford, which is this place over here, which is where my parents still live. So I tried to avoid living too close to my parents, but I'm not too far away. But it's a nice place to be in general. So that gives you an idea as to where Essex is. Excuse me. But the university is not just found in Colchester, it's slightly outside Colchester. It's what we call a campus university, which means everything all the students could ever need is found in the university area. So we have some lovely photos here. This is the whole of the campus for university, the University of Essex. So you can see we have some lakes, which is nice. There's some lovely lakes here. These are some of the nice buildings we have. This is the business school. The business school is famous in the university because it's the one that isn't made out of concrete. So they have an indoor jungle, which is very strange. But just to give you a bit of a point of scale, I'll show you this little building here. We can see is the mathematics department, and I'll show you what that is, what that looks like in a minute. But it hopefully gives you an idea of the whole size of the whole campus. And we have a nice football pitch here. So it's a very big campus. There's lots of green space. A lovely place to be in the summer. We also have a campus cat. So if you ever come to the university, you'll see lots of pictures of a cat around the place. There is a statue dedicated to this cat. It has a social media presence. So I think it's on Twitter and all Instagram and all the other ones. I don't know them. It's a cat that roams around the whole campus, and the students feed it and look after it. And it's been here for years and years and years. It's called Pebbles. So just a few more things about Essex because, we want to show off about university. Again, some lovely pictures we have of the campus, but we have a few campuses around Essex. This is Colchester, which is the main one. We have it's slightly less than this now, I should have updated, but around 15,000 students in total. But the big thing here, I think, is to show that we really have an international presence. We have students from all over. So not just from Southeast Asia, from Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, all these places. We also have students from everywhere else. Which is lovely because it means whenever there are big events going on campus, there's always some really nice food stands put up. So you can get food from Transylvania, you can get food from Mexico, from India, from Pakistan, from lots of different places. So it's always a really nice. There's always lots going on, which is nice. And then to show off just a little bit, even more, our department was ranked sixth in the last Guardian University ranking. So in the UK, there's about 3 major university ranking major rankings, and the Guardian is one of them, and we came sixth, and that was out of 60 mathematics departments across the whole country. So we are doing very well, and there's one more slide just to show off again about that. In this university ranking, I'm sure you recognise a lot of these names. So there's Oxford, there's Cambridge, Imperial, Warwick, that's where I mentioned before, St Andrews, which is very far up in Scotland, very good university, and then there we are in sixth. So, we've done very well. We're very happy with that, and that shows the kind of level that our department is keeping and the standards that we have. And it's a good reflection, really, actually, not just on the department, but on the students. So our students work very hard, achieve good degrees, they achieve good results, and this all feeds back into this ranking. So we're very happy to do that. Rankings aren't everything, but it's just nice when we do well. All right, so that's a bit of an overview of the university itself. As I say, it's a very nice place to be, but what's it actually like to study data science at the University of Essex? Now, this idea of data science, I think if people are studying it, and if you're studying statistics, you'd know it can differ. Some people concentrate data science on very much to do with the computing side of things. So maybe it's the coding, the storing of data, accessing data, processing of data, that type of stuff. Other people think it's more focused on actual applications. So maybe it's focused on the business side of things. So writing business cases based on data analysis. Maybe it's suggesting approaches you should do because of the analysis you've done on your data. Other people would say maybe it's actually focused more on statistics. So it's actually, how do you analyze data? How do you build up machine learning algorithms? Which machine learning algorithm or AI approach should you use at a given time? We tend to straddle more in our department on the statistics side of things. So we make sure people have a very good grounding in their understanding of statistics and mathematics. But we also work very closely with our computer science department, and obviously they're very focused on data storage, data handling, data processing. So we have a very good kind of envelope idea of what data science is and how we teach it and what students what parts of it they can study into. So this is just a little bit more about what we do at Data Science at Essex. Again, we're ranked 6th. You'll notice that comes up quite a bit. We have specific institutes set up just around the application and research of data science. So we have one called IADS, which is the Institute for Analytics and Data Science. This analytics bit is quite important. So that means we do focus, as I say, very heavily on statistics. We also have a very active research group which works with data focusing on social and economic data. So they do longitudinal studies. They will actually go out and get primary data, maybe through questionnaires. This is called ISIS, Institute for Social and Economic Research. This produces a lot of work and a lot of data. It's very good. We store the UK Data Archive. So again, we just have access to lots of data through this archive. We like to collaborate as well, and this will come up quite a bit through companies, through industry, through other universities, other research groups. We think collaboration is very, very important. And again, especially when you're talking about data, because you can pick up data these days from everywhere, every company, even every individual now, you all have access to lots of data. So because of that, we would like to work with different people in different groups to see what data people have and to see what approaches they're making. And it's still the best way really to actually do research and not just work in companies is to work in groups. And then at the end of it, again, just a little bit to talk about our department's kind of highlights. We do find that our graduate outcomes are very high. It's actually a very good number for students to be in jobs that are considered kind of the highest type of graduate job you can get. So it does show again that our students are very good and they can expect to get a good career and good job prospects after coming to the university. which we like to show off with. All right. So then again, still sticking with kind of data science at the university, it's not just us that do data science. So normally at this point, I'd like to ask students, what type of departments do you think would have data science within them? What departments would offer degrees that include data science? Now, I think most people hopefully wouldn't be too surprised to see mathematics departments there, because that's where I'm from. The computer science department as well. We have a department of computer science and electronic engineering, but clearly I think these are the two main departments that most people would expect to offer data science degrees. But one thing that I do want to try and instill in people and maybe get across in this talk is it's not just these two departments that do it. Every field now requires some data analysis. So in our university, all of these departments have degrees that include some data science within them, or which include data science within the degree itself. So this covers languages, politics, the business school, economics, even places like sports. So if any of you are interested in sports and sports science, if you play a lot of sports, you'll notice that teams these days and individuals are always talking about, they always have lots of data coming in, whether it's data about the actual match they've just played, or whether it's data about the health of the players in the team, or maybe it's data about which players they're thinking of bringing into the team. There is lots of data in sports, loads of it, and someone needs to analyze it. So all of these departments have degrees including data science. And again, here is just a bit of a list to show off the fact that we do have these degrees with data science in. These might have changed now, I should say, degree titles do change, but again, the point is the content will still be there. So it just gives you an idea that if you are studying data science, or statistics, which I believe a lot of you are, the opportunity to go and apply that data science to different fields and to different places is essentially limitless these days. So if you are interested in politics or history, there's a very big need for people to apply those skills to politics. Actually, literally today, in the UK, we are having some local elections. So there will have been, leading up to this point, there will have been lots of focus on the different parties to decide who it is they're going to try and get to vote for them, how they're going to try and do that. They need to do some market research. They need to identify what's the best way for them to spend their money, to do some marketing, or what is the most important thing that people consider when they're voting. That all comes from information through data sets, through questionnaires, through maybe looking at their social media posts. So all of that requires data scientists. So politics now is a very big area where data science and data analysis comes in. So just following on from that, I'm going to go through some slides very quickly now, but this is just more in depth than this. So as I say, sports science uses data for lots of different careers as well. There's lots of different careers where you can take, which you can get through having a background in data, but an interest in sports. And there's lots of different companies. I only show this one because this is tennis. This is not just my favorite sport. Obviously, tennis is the best sport. So we use it a lot in tennis now. If any of you are interested in football, you'll have heard of VAR, which everyone kind of dislikes, but that is to do with data analysis as well. And there's lots of different places you can use your data science in sports. Similarly with linguistics, one of actually the biggest things in linguistics at the moment is to do with understanding what people are writing. Now, the big use for this would be, well, let's think, can we think of something that if wants to really understand a question that I'm giving it in order to then respond to that question in most appropriate way possible? Well, that all comes together with ChatGPT, with your LLMs, with your AI. So computational linguistics, which is kind of what it's called if you're doing data science and linguistics, these are now being hired for a lot of money by all the big tech companies, because anyone who's building an AI approach, an LLM, requires people to understand language, requires people to understand how people talk and communicate to each other. So computational linguistics is one of the big recruiting kind of fields these days, which perhaps people don't necessarily think about. Government politics, as I say, and this is required across the whole of government and politics. Psychology, if you're interested in that. Psychology has always actually had a big part in data. Arguably, the best people in to understand applied statistics, and universities tend to be psychologists because they have to do a lot of data analysis. They have to do a lot of statistics on their experiments. And these are you then in careers, if you're interested in going into marketing or consultancy or human resources or going into business, actually having a background in psychology and going into business is a very, very good thing. But you need to then have your data science and data analysis skills in order to understand kind of what the data you're getting from that. And lots of different companies will then require these. And finally, in biology and ecology, I'll just go through. These are the two areas that I kind of work in, so I'll talk a bit more about them later. But the point of highlighting these two is, again, if you're interested in a science, and maybe you're interested in biology, ecology, geography can count as a science, chemistry, physics. All of these now are large areas that focus on data analysis and data science skills. So if you have an interest in that, but maybe you're not doing a degree in it or you haven't studied since school, that doesn't stop you from going into careers or going into fields that actually are mainly focusing on these different topics. You can learn about the biology, about the ecology whilst you're working there, but you will have the data science and data analysis skills that can be used to understand the data that the biologists and ecologists are getting. So again, now I went through those a bit quickly. There's lots of information there. Sorry, I stole them from a different talk. Again, I'll send them around. But the point of all of these slides was just to show off all the different areas that require data analysis. So like I say, I think being students, you always have one eye on the future. So this hopefully will give you an idea to think about. There's plenty of different things you can go into based not just on what you're studying, but what you're interested in. And if you get a job or a career which allows you to work on something in which you're interested, you will do very well in that job and you'll do well in that career. So I think that's very important to highlight. All right, so I'm now just going to move on a little bit and talk about specifically our degree. So this is the degree that we offer. And just to give you an idea of what it's like at the University of Essex, to see how it's similar or different maybe to the one you're studying. And again, to point out that data science degrees, just like all degrees, can vary from university to university. So you should never worry about maybe not studying something that one of your friends is studying at a different university or anything like that. It just gives you an idea of different areas that different universities teach. So this is our first and second year. I don't go into too much here, but here you can just see we cover the basics of mathematics and a lot of introduction to different types of programming. And in second year, we're still covering some of the introduction topics, so artificial intelligence as well as databases and IR, so information retrieval. We're getting slightly more advanced in some of the statistics and some of the mathematics we're teaching. But across the 2 years, we obviously do a big introduction of the mathematics, the statistics, and then the data handling and programming skills data scientists require. We also focus a lot on one of the most important parts of being a data analyst these days, which is the ability to communicate. So if you're hired by some company as a data scientist, you're there to do the data analysis. Your manager, your boss might not have done mathematics or statistics since they were at school. So it's all well and good you coming to them with a report which includes your p values you found or talking about what machine learning approaches or AI approach you've used. They won't understand that. They will just want to know what was the result, what was the outcome, what's the interpretation of those results. So it's always very important that you're able to work together in teams and to communicate your results. So in the first year, we do a prod team challenge, and in the second year, we follow that on as well. And we also focus throughout each year, and I'll come to the year 3 in a second, on careers and employability, because again, as students, we know you're not just here for 3 years. We're trying to set you up for your career, for whatever it is you want to do after you've been here. So we make sure students do have a good look at their careers and employability afterwards. And in the final year, this is where you have a little bit more choice. So you have to take certain modules. We tell you to take these ones because we think they're important. You have to do an individual project, which is a very nice thing to do. The individual project gives you scope to focus on something that you're interested in. So it could be to do with a data set in an area you're interested. So again, maybe you're interested in biology and ecology or sports. You could focus on doing a project around that data set. You could focus on doing a project more theoretical approach, maybe on the mathematics or statistics of machine learning, or you could do something entirely different, up to you. But it gives you a chance to work closely with an academic, working specifically on something that you want to focus on. And that's a really good opportunity for you to show off your skills. Again, thinking about employers and careers, when you're applying for jobs, you can say that you specifically chose to work on this type of data set because you wanted to go into this field and to this career. Or when you were doing this individual project, you showed the ability to work on your own, to do research, to produce novel and new results. And then you get to choose three. Actually, I think that three should be a two, but never mind. You get to choose some optional modules. So perhaps you're more interested in the programming, so you can focus on these programming modules. Maybe you're more interested in the mathematics, so you could focus on what's called non-linear programming, which is actually to do with optimization, not programming, or something called reinforcement learning. So you have the chance to kind of specialize in whatever you're interested in. And again, throughout the whole of this, we make sure we focus on our career and employability for our students. So just to round up kind of the overarching skills that we teach our students, it covers everything. So mathematical and statistics ones I have underlined and put in stars just because they are very important for our degree that we offer. Other degrees, as I say, focus more on maybe the coding or the business side of things. We focus a lot on the mathematics and the statistics. But then you still get these programming skills. Hopefully everyone understands all of these. I recognize R. This is the only language I pretty much use. It's not really a coding language, is it? Well, it's definitely not a programming language. SQL, obviously we do a lot of SQL because that's to do with data storage and data retrieval. And you understand your analysis skills, your data handling and interrogation, which is very important. And then this other one, which I keep mentioning, is this ability to interpret and to present your results. Because if you're the one in the team who is very good and very capable at presenting your results, you're the one who will progress in your career very quickly. But you also learn lots of other stuff as well. It's not just this, but these are kind of the major skill sets that we try and teach. Then we also offer obviously extensions onto this. So we do master's degrees, we do masters in data science, we do masters in data science and its applications. If you're more interested in a degree that has kind of a less focus on the mathematics and statistics, a bit more focus on maybe actually the applications of data science. And we also, this won't be for any student here, but it's kind of nice to know, we also offer what's called applied data science. This is a degree for people who have not taken mathematics or statistics at university. So maybe they come from politics or psychology or one of those other fields that I mentioned, and they've realized that doing data science is going to be really important and helpful for their career, but they don't have the maths or stats background. Or we offer a conversion course, which allows these students to actually get a master's in data science, despite not having that undergraduate background in mathematics. So this focuses on very introductory mathematics and statistics. But I highlight this just to, again, to show to everyone how important and how sought after data science is across lots of different fields. So even if students haven't studied it at university, they're realizing after being to university that that's the skills they need in order to get a good career. And these are then some of the companies that we work with. Yeah, we don't need to focus too much. We have lots of other ones as well. All right, the last little bit before, because I'm going quite over time here, the last little bit before I start talking a little bit more about my research, let's just talk about where our students go. So our students have gone from our data science degrees to various different places. Obviously, to companies who focus on data analysis. There's companies that focus on accountancy and mathematical finance. There's companies that focus on consultancy. You'll recognize some big names, I think, from here. So you've got your big banks, you've got Lloyd's, Deutsche, JP Morgan Chase as well. So that's a very big bank. You then have your more kind of computers-focused companies, so Fujitsu, Adobe. And then there's other ones as well. So there's charities, your third sector, so places like UNICEF. But we find our graduates go to a wide range of different backgrounds, all using their data science skills. Here are some lovely pictures of some of our data scientists, and they've gone on to work as an actuary or work for KPMG or for Fujitsu or for an actual machine learning startup company. I believe this was a startup. So our students do go off and go to nice different places. I'm just going to go through this a little bit more. Right, so we're going to move on to the research side of things now. I mean, I can pause if there are any questions specifically about the kind of the education, the degree, or I can come back to that at the end if that's easier. I think I will. I'll come back to that at the end when we've finished everything. We can round up everything. All right. So
Sorry.
this, yeah,
Yeah, you can come back to it again.
perfect. So the research then that happens at university, there's lots of this that goes on. As I said, we're very focused in the university in not just theoretical stuff, but the applied. So we work very closely with companies. In fact, a lot of the research we do is working with someone from industry on a specific problem that a company or that an industry is having. That's really important to us because that means the work we do has an application straight away. So we are actually working on solving real world problems. There's a list of different things we work on. So we've worked on things to do with housing market predictions using AI, various algorithmic approaches. There's some specific research that people in the department have done around Bitcoin. Bitcoin seems to be everyone's favorite thing at the moment. I can tell you, having read this paper, the outcome is do not go to Bitcoin. It is not stable at all. No one knows what the future is, and it's really not safe. But it's up to you. However, we've done research around the volatility of it. One of my colleagues done some research around this was some of the sports analysis side of things. This is my research. So this is me. I'll talk a little bit about it in a minute. But I look at animal movement. So we had a lovely little fish, and I've analysed the movement of this fish and the behaviour of the fish using some quite advanced actually statistical methods. One of my colleagues is actually a physicist by training. She looks at analysing data sets that come from astrophysics. And if you're interested in physics and astrophysics, that is all data now. We just get so much data, but it's how you clean that data, how you understand that data, how you process that data is the really important thing. And then Lisa here has worked very specifically on using image recognition, so using CNNs to understand something to do with the galaxies. And then we have some quite nice other approaches. So this is to do with text analytics. Our colleague Saida here has worked on understanding handwriting. So handwriting recognition essentially, and how they can better use techniques to better recognize people's handwriting. And I don't know if anyone has used the tool in ChatGPT, or I think it's ChatGPT, or one of them where you can put your handwriting in and ask it to not just analyze it, but then also to maybe reproduce something that looks like your handwriting. That is very impressive now. I handwrite all of my lecture notes for my students, and I'm starting to translate them into actually nice typed versions. And ChatGPT is amazing. Despite my terrible handwriting, it can read it very well. And people like Cider are the ones who have come up with the algorithms, with the approaches to actually allow that to happen. So that's a nice thing as well. Sorry, we've repeated. Then just a bit close, and you don't have to worry about this, but these KTPs, these are specific projects we have that we work with companies, where a company will write to us and say, I've got this project. Is there someone within your university who can help me? This is across the whole UK. There's the opportunity for doing this. We are the number one university for engaging in this approach. So we work very closely and very heavily with real world applications. Now, the good side for students for this is this obviously means that when we're putting together data sets, when we're talking about what skills we know students need in the real life in careers, because we work so closely with these industry partners, we know this straight away. So all of the education, a lot of our education content is driven by this close link with industry. So we know what industries are asking for, so we know the skills that we're teaching our students. And that's a really nice thing that we can do. It also means we can get these people involved and come to talk to students, to give them information and tips about careers, about different jobs they can go into in the future. So it's a really nice thing that we do, and we do it very well. And I won't go through. So again, we've had lots of different ones. So this is a nice one. If any of you have ever had a delivery from a company, well, how does the company know what's the best order to deliver these things to? And also, how do they know what's the best, how much they should charge, I should say, for different delivery slots? Because they want to charge enough so that they make some money and cover their costs, but they don't want to charge too much to put people off using the using the delivery service. And we had colleagues here who worked with Ocado, which is one of the big delivery companies for a grocery chain in the UK. And then we have people working with other companies as well. Hopefully you recognise some of these. NHS, I'm sure everyone recognises. Rolls-Royce, very big car company. Actually, although they mainly now make jet engines, I think. And then Tiptree, which I don't expect anyone to know, but Tiptree makes jam. So if you ever come to Essex, you can have some very nice jam or jelly if you're an American, that's what they call it. And that's just around the corner. And the reason we put this is someone's just won an award because someone from computer science built a robot that can pick the fruit that makes the jam, and they can determine if the fruit is ripe and ready to be picked or not. So they can, which is quite nice. Very clever thing to do. And we also work with other things. All right. So I think for the next about 15 or 20 minutes or so, I can talk a little bit about my specific research as well. So as I said, I am officially a mathematical biologist. My background is mathematics. I know very little about biology. So I have to work closely with biologists and with ecologists. So they are the ones who will maybe set out the problem they've got, or they'll help me understand and interpret my results. And as I said, that interpretation is very, very important. So they'll be the ones who are telling me what we actually want to try and find out from this piece of analysis, what we can do with those results, how we can interpret them, and how we can maybe apply them to the actual in real life. So the specific area I look at is animal movement. Now, the best way to think about this, I would say, is imagine you have some sort of cat or a pet or a dog or anything you like. If you attach a smartwatch to it or a GPS to it, and then let it to run around, what you'd get is a lovely track. You'll be able to see where your cat's been, or where your dog's been, or where the bird that you're tracking has been. And from that track, so that those locations that we get, that is the data that I use. And from that data, I try and understand what the animal is doing. Have they changed their behavior? I can also understand if the environment has changed, maybe. I can use it to predict their behavior in the future. And we've got lots of other things. Actually, there's lots of things we can understand just purely from looking at the past that these animals are taking. Now, it seems quite a small field, quite a niche field, but actually there's loads of things to do with this now. It's been growing rapidly for the last 60 years. We have lots of specific textbooks that come out based just around this field. We have specific data banks that are set up around the world just to keep all this data. So you can imagine, we'll come back to this in a minute, if I am recording this cat where it's going, well, that's going to be a lot of data if I'm recording it for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and if I'm recording not just one cat, but 10, 20, 100 cats. Suddenly, if lots of people are doing this, there's going to be loads of data. So we have to have specific data banks dedicated just to storing this type of data for us. And we have lots of scholarly journals and other places that have developed in the last sort of 50, 60 years, which are dedicated just to producing work on this field. So it's quite a nice growing one. I hadn't heard of it until I started studying it for my degree, so it was new to me. But the other reason I liked it is because there's a very good crossover between mathematics, statistics, and actually the biology and understanding. So the big question we might have is, all right, well, why am I doing this? Well, there's a big list here of reasons that I actually want to study this. So as I said, I can use it to understand the behavior of animals. Just to point out as well, don't forget humans count as animals. So if I'm trying to understand human behavior, this is one of the best ways I can do it. I can use this also to potentially diagnose illness in individuals. So again, if any of you have had a pet, or in fact, if you yourself aren't feeling very well, you know you behave slightly differently. You're not going to be moving around the place as much. You're probably going to be lying on the sofa or in bed more. So just again, by seeing how you're moving without knowing anything else about you, I can probably determine if you are feeling a bit unwell. Now, if we could do that for animals that can't tell us they're not feeling very well, that means we can predict or we can catch individuals that are lame or that need some assistance earlier than otherwise we could. And if you're a farmer with a very big herd of cows or something, you want to understand when some of your animals require some assistance, require a visit to the vet as soon as possible, because that means you're getting the animal better quicker, and that's going to help you with your farming. There's lots of other applications to this as well. So it's not just me analyzing data of movement. I can then use it to actually code robots to move. So I can actually take what I've learned from the animal and I can apply that to making my own model of movement. If I can model movement, I can program robots to move. We all know that there's going to be things like autonomous vehicles coming soon, so self-driving vehicles. I think we've all seen drone technology as well, how they interact with each other. That all comes from an understanding of movement. So all of this field is used in those type of applications. If any of you played any games ever, you might have some NPCs, so non-playable characters. They have to move around and interact with you. You need to make sure they're moving around in a realistic manner. So how do you do that? Well, you need to understand what realistic movement is, and how are you going to do that? Well, you need to go to someone who understands movement. So we do work with people who work on games to try and make movement more realistic. And we understand things like migration. And this last one has been something I've worked on a little bit, and I think we can all maybe remember this. Epidemiology. This is where we try and understand the spread of disease, and specifically how does human movement affect the spread of disease. So if we all cast our mind back to 5 or 6 years when we were perhaps forced to stay in our house because we weren't allowed to move, well, why did they determine that was the correct response to COVID? And it was people who were working on movement and individual movement and animal movement who understood, well, if we're talking about trying to minimize contacts, we need to then understand and predict how people are moving. So this is why they came to people who study animal movement. All right. So here's just a slide to make things look slightly more complicated, because if in doubt, always throw in some maths to make things look better. There's lots of different ways in which I work on animal movement, and which the whole field does. So we have lots of different approaches here. We don't need to know what they're all about. The main one I would focus on is this one here. So I focus on something called a random walk. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But there's lots of other different approaches you can make. Some of these are very mathematical. Some of these are very statistical. So these diffusion equation ODE, PDEs, if you've seen a differential equation before, which hopefully some of you have, you might have without realizing it, these system of ODEs and PDEs are very important. Alternatively, you can use something called more statistical approaches. So kernel density estimations or Brownian bridges or step selection functions. These are where we have some data and we're trying to predict the kind of statistical distribution of this data we have. Or if we have the statistical distribution, can we give a prediction as to what's going to happen? What's the most likely places this animal is going to visit? So we have kind of two different approaches. You have the modeling one, which uses models first to then predict things, and then we can validate them with data, but we come up with the model. Or we have the statistical side, where we tend to start with the data set and then we're applying some statistical framework on top of that data set. But this is all well and good, but this depends on how much data we can have and how do we actually get this data. And there's lots of different ways we can get data these days. So the easiest one is, like I was talking about when we were putting our GPS onto a cat or dog, is where we can actually literally attach a device to an individual animal and we will track that individual animal as it moves. So we have a lovely picture of a cow here with a collar, and then that collar had a GPS on. It wasn't, actually it was GPS. Technology now is so good that we've actually been able to attach mini trackers to the back of bees and to the back of butterflies, and it doesn't affect their movement, which is very impressive. So we can do these by different methods. We don't just have to use GPS, we can use other approaches as well. We can also video track. So I've done this before. This is where we have an animal moving in an area, and we have a camera on top looking in overview of the area of the the area it's in, and we just track that animal as it moves, and then we'll use some video tracking. So we'll use some CNN approaches maybe to track that animal, and then we'll get some movement paths from that way. There's other ways we can do it. Capture recaptures, where you just set up traps around a field, and then you come back after a few hours, see which animals are there, tag those animals, then you let them go, and then you set up some more traps maybe the next day, and you see if those animals have returned, or you see where they've moved to. Or you can just actually just sit and stare. This is what this is doing. This is called transect. This is where you just sit and watch and see if you see any animals. This is done a lot for things like dolphin counting or whale counting, where the easiest way is just to go into a boat and you just look and you count how many dolphins, how many whales you see in your field of vision. And then that gives us an idea. But anyway, the point of this is there's lots of it, and there's so much of it that we aren't talking about, data sets with 100 or 1,000 pieces of data. It gets up to now, I've just been working on data sets with not just millions, but billions of pieces of data. So these data sets become incredibly big, incredibly quickly. And the reason for that is because the technology has evolved so quickly. Again, just think about your phone and how accurate it is on storing your GPS and how small these can get. I mean, your phone's now quite big, but you understand the chip in it would be very, very small that would actually do the GPS. And if we can now start attaching things to the back of insects, we are getting very accurate, very frequent data that is very cheap. And that's the other very important thing, is it's cheap for us to do it. And because it's cheap, we keep getting more data. We now have so much data that we're actually having to write about the fact that we have so much data. So we're producing scholarly articles saying that how are we approaching these, how do we approach these data sets, because they are now so big that the standard approaches we've been using historically, they're just not good enough. The statistical approaches and the data and the analytical approaches we've been using take up so much computational time, we just cannot run them on these big data sets, these vast data sets that we have. And we all know the more data you have, the better, because the more accurate it will be. So we're now having to actually develop new approaches purely because we're having so much data that we want to analyze, which is a nice problem to have. The problem, actually, the main problem is we're getting data so quickly, it's just very hard to keep up with it. But again, that's good. It keeps us with something to do, which is nice. All right, excuse me. So just quickly, again, I'm going to break down a little bit for the last 5 minutes or so. I'm going to break down what I mean by my kind of approach to animal movement. So here's my lovely cat. This cat has been moving around this lovely path over here. Now, if I attach a GPS to it, then I'm not going to get its location at every single point. What happens is I get its location, let's say every second, or maybe every half a second, or every 5 seconds, or maybe just every minute. And then I get these dots, and then I connect these dots together. And when I connect these dots together, I get a line, a kind of zigzag line, that's quite close to the actual path, but obviously it's not as smooth. The more points I get, so the higher the frequency of my data, the smoother it would be. But again, then I run into the problem of having too much data. So we need the sweet point of having enough data that I can mimic my movement path of my animal without having too much data. Well, this is good, but then what can I actually do with this? So if I zoom in here a little bit, then, before that, I'll zoom in a second. So I should say this data is stored at a specific time. I have a specific location. So I have an X coordinate and a Y coordinate. Then my next data point comes in 5 minutes later. I have a new data point, so the new location. So it started here and now it's moved. Importantly, this data is time dependent. So a lot of the time when you have data, let's say, for example, I was looking at results of the students in my class for their exams, I actually wouldn't care the order of that data. It could be alphabetical by first name, it could be alphabetical by surname, I could order it by the highest mark first. It doesn't matter the order of the data if I was looking at some of the statistics, because I'm just looking at exam results. However, because this is time series data, it becomes order important. I obviously need to make sure I keep it in the order of the time, because I'm starting here and then moving here. I'm connecting these things up by a line. So I have to make sure I keep it in order. I only highlight this because this is a different type of data, which means I have to do different analysis on it. So it's called time series data. Anyway, so if I go back to my lovely little diagram here of my moving cat, I have all these different locations. And the things that I'm interested in, specifically, this is the research I do, is I want to know, well, what is the distance between the locations? So I've started here, I've moved to here, I want to know what's this distance here? and I call that a step length. I also need to know an angle, because I need to know if I'm here, well, where's my next location? Well, I know I've got to move in this distance, which is going to be something like here, but in which direction do I need to move? So I need to know an angle. Now that angle could be an angle from north, so I could measure an orientation, or what I look at is actually something called a turning angle. So in this case, I've gone from this point to this point, so I'm moving in this direction. Now, when I've got to here, I need to move in this direction. Well, if I'm facing this way, I need to turn by this angle to then face in this direction. And then when I get to here, I need to, well, I'll be facing in this direction. I'll need to turn by this angle to face in this direction, and I move in this direction. So that's all the information I pretty much want. I just want to know the distance between locations and the angle I have to turn between them. That is all the information I want. And just from that information, I claim that I can go back to this list. Just from that information, I claim I can understand all of these different things. I can understand behavior. I can identify illness. I can program robots to interact and to move with each other just by those 2 bits of information. And that's a lot of what my research is based on. The reason we focus on this is because this is the easiest thing for us to get. It's some simple data, simple information that I can then make some very complicated predictions and complicated models. If you, I won't go into this too much, but if you're interested in the mathematics, we call this a stochastic process because stochastic just means random, essentially. There's some randomness going on. I measure my step lengths, and then I plot my step lengths into a lovely probability distribution, density function, or whatever you want to call it, which would look something normally like this. My turning angles, because I can turn left or I can turn right, but normally I'm moving roughly straight forward, my turning angle distribution would look like this. So I would roughly be moving with a 0-degree turn. So I'm roughly moving in the same direction. So I don't tend to take big turns. But occasionally I might take a big turn. So this would be over here. I'm a mathematician, so I don't say degrees, I use radians, but this would be a negative 180-degree turn, which is a turn to the left by 180 degrees. That's a complete turn. This pi would be a positive 180-degree turn, so that's a turn to the right by 180 degrees. And just to let people know a little bit about these types of distribution, these distributions are called circular distributions. So I'm only interested in angles between negative 180 and positive 180, or between 0 and 360 degrees, because that's the amount of degrees in a circle. These are actually used very, very frequently without people realizing it. So if you're interested in wind direction, so if you're interested in sailing, or if you're just interested in the weather or meteorology, you need to know the direction of the wind. Obviously, the direction of the wind is only going to be either is going to be in a circle. So it's going to be like a compass, is it from the north, the east, the south, the west. So actually wind directions are stored as this type of distribution and the distribution on the unit circle. There are different types of distributions you can use. Don't worry about these, but I'm just showing that the main distributions we use, like your normal distribution or your Cauchy distribution, we can't use them because I have to have them starting at 0 and ending at 360, or starting at negative 180 and finishing at 180. So we use special distributions, and these are called wrapped distributions. They're called circular distributions, and I can form these circular distributions by what we call wrapping distributions, or just coming up with my own distribution. Don't need to worry about it too much, but it's just to show that by focusing on these turning angles, I have to analyze them using a different approach than the normal statistics you would see. I'm going to skip over some of this now because I think we're getting towards the end of the time. Yes, and I've been talking for a while. So I'm just going to quickly show you some of the research examples that I've actually done. And again, I don't expect you necessarily to be able to follow a lot of this. It's very quick, but just to show you some of the work that I've done. And this is split into 2 parts. The first one is the more mathematical stuff, and the second part is the more data-driven side of things. So again, if in doubt, show lots of mathematics. This was the first paper I ever did. And what we were looking at was a specific mathematical model of movement. So I was interested in, if I'm at this point and then I'm moving to this point over here, what angle do I have to turn between? Well, I claim there's 2 different things I would try and do. If I was walking in a crowd to a shop, I would first of all, I want to know where that shop is. So I've got to try and navigate towards that shop. So that's going to determine which direction I can move in. But I'm also, there's a big crowd of people, I'm also going to probably try and walk in the same direction that I've been walking before. When you're walking somewhere, you don't take one step this way, then another step this way, then another step this way. You roughly walk in the same direction. So what I want to do is I want to balance my ability to walk in the same direction. So I've got momentum going in that direction, along with the direction that I think I need to move in. So I have to balance those two things. So this is what this was looking at. Basically, I was saying, well, how do I balance them? Should I try and move in the direction that I want to go in more, or should I try and move in the direction I've been coming previously? And we did a lot of work around some mathematical analysis, demonstrating actually that the best thing to do is to try and move roughly in the same direction you've always been moving in. And if you add in some error, that means you're most likely to actually get to the place you want to quicker than if you actually just focused on trying to move in that direction. It's a bit of a weird thing to explain, but we did some mathematical analysis and some statistics on that. I then had a look at, and again, this is going to be a bit quick, so I apologize. But again, if we're talking about what's one of the reasons for studying animal movement, and I said that I can try and determine animal behavior. Well, if you're an animal, we are all animals, we do different things depending on what we're doing. So at the moment, I'm at work, or actually I'm at home, but I'm at work. So I'm I'm in my house. I might go downstairs and make myself a drink or a cup of coffee. Then I'll come back up to my desk and then I'll sit around a little bit and I won't move too much. But then later on, I'm going to go to the shops. Now, when I go to the shops, I'm going to then be moving in probably quite a constant speed and not moving around and changing direction too often, because I'm going to start where I am. I'm going to move in a straight line towards the shop. So I'm going to have different behaviors because my movements are going to look differently because I'm having different behaviors. I'm either at home, not moving too much, and then wandering around the house in a very small area, or maybe I'm going to the shops, so I'm moving in a bigger area in a constant speed. So one of the things we would try and do, a big part of my work, is to try and understand these different behaviors and to classify them. So here is some movement. You can say I've got an animal doing maybe one type of movement here. It's kind of walking around a little bit, but very smoothly. Then it's suddenly moving around a lot in this little location here. Then it's moving around again quite smoothly, then moving a lot around here, then smoothly again, then moving a lot around here. So what I wanted to do was to be able to understand just from the time series data I had, just from this data, when is an animal doing that nice straight smooth movement and when is it doing this kind of more concentrated localized movement? So how can I decide which behavior the animal is in at any given point? And we can understand that again just by looking at the distribution of the turning angles. So that was how far they turn between steps and the step lengths. And there's different ways you can do that. A very popular method is to use something called a hidden Markov model. I looked at it slightly differently. I took these turning angles and decided if I could split it into different distributions which correspond to each of those individual behaviors. And then I looked at how they would combine together to form one distribution. And that's the approach I did. And then we ended up with this demonstrating when that would happen and when that would not happen. And then we showed this approach works quite well on some specific data. Actually, this was to do with some elephant movement data. So we could classify this elephant movement based just on these turning angles. And I could classify it into two different behaviors. Finally, I'll just talk about this one, and then I think that'll be me done. Because it's a nice thing. I was also interested in how people come into contact with each other and how different movement affects different rates of contacts. Now, again, if I'm talking about how individual people come into contact with each other, obviously this has a very big focus and application on disease spread, because the more contacts you have with other people, the quicker, if you have a cold or if you have COVID or something, the quicker you're going to spread that disease. So I was trying to understand how different models of movement affect the spread of disease. So if you've seen an epidemiological model, something called an SIR model, that assumes that everyone moves randomly, completely freely all the time. So I removed that and restricted the model to allow more accurate movement. So one of these random walk type movement models. And essentially, I just showed that the way in which the disease spread does depend on the movement behavior of the individuals, but actually it wasn't too bad. So I did show that the assumed result, which is where we have the number of contacts is proportional to this formula here, when alpha equals 1, I did show that actually that isn't always the case, and actually alpha is normally between 0 and 1, and it's only in 1 in certain extreme cases. So this was just some work to show how actually important it is when you're thinking about epidemiology and the spread of disease to actually take movement into account. All right, I'm going to move on a little bit now. Last couple of things I'm going to say, because I am a lecturer, I'm interested in education. I am working on a project that uses movement ecology as a way of teaching mathematics to students. So a lot of projects, what we call interdisciplinary education projects, certainly in the UK, they're very popular because the idea is we want people to understand how science, technology, mathematics all works together. So rather than teaching just maths, just physics, just chemistry, just biology, you can work projects together that shows that in order to do an experiment, you need to know mathematics, you need to know statistics, and you need to know computer science and programming. What I like about movement ecology and what we've been looking at is it's actually a very good way of taking people's understanding of the biology of things and then informing the mathematics. So these circular distributions, they're very complicated and you don't see them normally in mathematics until university. But by starting off by understanding how an animal moves, you can then understand these different distributions. So I've been working with a college nearby to do this, to try and teach students. And as I said, the way in which I started understanding computer science, data science, and statistics was by getting my hands on this animal movement data. So actually, what I'm trying to do is put a project where this is what we're doing. We're giving students the background in animal movement and then getting them to understand the statistics and the mathematics, then getting them to interpret those results, then getting them to build a nice little robot, and they're going to program that robot, and so they can see how the different movement actually looks like in real life. So this is again a nice kind of different thing that I'm working on, and then I've got lots of future work that I'm doing, and again just some mathematics. But I'm quite interested now in group movement, and the problem we have with group movement is I have to then try and get lots of particles to interact with each other, and that's very hard mathematically speaking to predict what's going to happen based on that. And then developing some machine learning tools on these big data sets that we have from animal data. Oh, and then finally, I'm working a little bit on some stork migration. Again, I just like this because the stork was the first animal that kind of proved, sorry, that animals migrate during the winter. And we have some data sets where storks start in Germany up here and then migrate all the way down to places in Africa. And I've got lots of movement data with them, and I'm trying to understand their migration behavior and things like that. And good. All right. So I'm going to stop there. That was, I think, a bit longer than I expected, so I apologize for that. Thank you all for listening. And if you have any questions, please let me know.
Okay, thank you for the materials, Dr. Bill. It's such an insightful materials. That's a lot to cover as well. And now we'll be moving on to the Q&A sessions. Those who have any question can raise their hand or send through the chat box, and we will deliver the questions. Okay, so I think we have one who has raised their hands. Muhammad Wahyu.
Okay, thank you for the time. I really impressed by your research that tells us about animal movement and how you tells us the example by our as human movement. In fact, as the biology is the subject that studying about growth process of living creature, and I think that it would take a long time to research about their behaviors. And it gives us a big data to be analyzed. I think it would take more time to do this research. You've told us too that your main problem is getting so much data. I would like to know how long did your research take, and is there any problems, other problems or challenges while researching? And what did you do to solve that problem? Maybe is it difficult to apply mathematical concept to animal behavior since yeah, we know animal are absurd or something like that. Yeah, maybe.
Yes, no, good. Thank you. That's a very good question.
Thank you.
You're right. So the quick answer, how long things take. Um, it can take a lot of time because sometimes because I'm working with biologists, so the biologists will need to get the data, so they'll have to run the experiments. Often what might happen is the biologists, the ecologists will have already run the experiment. They'll come to me with the data, and then I will ask them to get some more data. So we have to go back and get some more data. There's also a problem, Mohammed, that as I said, I'm not a biologist. So the biologists have to explain to me their expertise, what they're looking for, and then I have to understand that before I can start analyzing the data. And then I've also got to explain to them as best I can what I can actually do with that data, what the mathematics and statistics can let me do. So there is a lot of back and forth, um, which is that does take time. However, the good thing is if you're working with lots of people, there's other people um, to help you write up your results, to help you understand your results. So it does work well both ways. Talking about problems with it, now this is the big problem. You're right, animals are very annoying. They don't do what I want them to. It would be very easy if they could just act how I want them to, then I could analyze it and it would be fine. Unfortunately, animals will change how they're behaving because, well, just like humans, sometimes we'll get up one day and be in a bit of a different mood, or something will happen to us that hasn't happened to before, so we don't know how to react. That's very annoying. So this is one of the reasons why we get so much data because again, statistics, hopefully we know the more data you have, kind of the more noise gets smoothed out. So if you have lots of data, then you can try and understand, okay, all these extreme events, these occasional events are being averaged out by the average behavior. Now, actually, one thing that I'm a bit more interested in is the opposite of that. So the problem with averaging out behavior is then you miss those interesting events. You miss those one-off events that are different to what's normally happening. So it's quite important to try and identify when you have these outliers because they might be the important, more interesting things to look at. So one of the things, again, that I'm focusing on and I try and teach my students is if you have outliers in data sets, don't just dismiss them. They might be the most important or the most interesting parts of your data set. So often if you're doing analysis, you do often find these data points that are different to everything else. So you just remove them because they're outliers. And we have to do that in order to determine what the average behavior is. That's fine. But don't forget you've done that. Have a look at those outliers and see maybe they give us some insights, some information that we're missing. And just quickly then on other things that I'm now looking at, as I said, group behavior. I'm interested in how groups interact together. So if you've seen schools of fish swimming together, they can all interact together and they move in very nice shapes and patterns. We've seen big flocks of birds and starlings. They all seem to know how to fly in the same direction. They all turn together. They don't bump into each other. It's very impressive. That's been studied a lot. So if you can do that very nicely through computer programs and by coding things together, like I said, with gaming, so NPC characters, we know how to do that. With drones as well, we know how they can fly together without knocking into each other. But I'm interested in the behavior that we kind of ignore, which is the beginning. So if you see a flock of birds suddenly fly off if they're all on the ground eating, and then a dog comes and runs towards them, they suddenly fly off together. Now, that initial behavior of how they then start flocking together, that's what I'm interested in, that initial reaction and initial bit. That's often not looked at because we look at the average behavior, which is we wait until they've already started flying together, then we use that behavior. So that's one of the things, again, that's the outlier that I'm interested in. Yes. So I hope that has helped a little bit. If there are any other bits of your question I missed, I apologize, but it was a good question.
It was enough. Thank you for the answers.
Anyone else?
You, Muhammad Wahyu. Is there anyone else who wants to ask a questions? We have still plenty of. Oh, yeah, we have plenty of slots left. So, Nisa, Ismail, Rahayu, you can ask your question.
Excuse me, am I audible?
Yeah. Yes.
First of all, my name is Nisa Ismarahayu. I'm a freshman of Statistics Department. Since we are talking about data science or statistics in the first time, I really want to know that does University of Essex expect the student to have a strong programming skill in the first year? Since we know that our program really related to programming skills in the course. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. That's another good question as well. So in general, when it comes to programming skills, we don't expect students to have any programming background in their when they come to university. Because in the UK, we don't teach students programming at high school for mathematics or statistics. Our students do see a little bit of using a computer. So Excel, if anyone still uses Excel, I still use it a lot. That's as far as we go. So in the first year, we do not expect coding or programming background. We teach students two main languages. Excuse me. Well, actually, I'll be honest. In mathematics, we teach them one main programming language to use in the statistics course, and that's R. So that is, if I get my slide up, that is the one that is just called R, which is very hard to Google search for because you have to just search for the letter R. But it's the one that I use. It's the one that a lot of statisticians use because it is very, very good and very useful for analyzing big data sets because it doesn't have much other functionality, to be honest. It's quite a simple language that focuses purely on statistics. There we go. So this one here. So this is the R that we use. Now, even in the data science degree, so I will just show you, data science degree, we introduce R into Statistics 1. It is used in Statistics 2. It is used in stochastic processes, it's used in linear regression, it's used in applied statistics, and it's used in data visualization. Now, the other languages, again, that we won't expect students to know, but we introduce them to is Python. Introduction to programming, they'll see Python. Object-oriented programming, I'm not entirely sure, actually. That's not my expertise, so they will see something there. And you'll get introduced to SQL, so SQL in databases as well. And then after you've had the introduction to them, you get more advanced in the second year and the third year. So yeah, we do not expect a background in coding. Obviously, if you've been exposed to it, then it's better because each of these modules, even the introduction to programming ones, we're not just testing your ability to program, we're actually using some applied approaches on that as well. So if you understand the coding, you'll be able to run the code to do the problems much easier and much quicker because you'll already have some understanding of some coding. But in general, yeah, we don't expect any background knowledge. When you get to the third year, that's the one where we do expect students to be familiar with and able to use R, Python, and SQL, because the first and second year we've spent preparing students for that. Have you, Lisa, have you used any coding languages? Which ones are you aware of, or which ones have you used before?
in our first semester, we use C++.
Yes.
And in the second semester, we are into Python.
Good. That's yeah. I think
Yes.
C++. I think we see somewhere. That's a computer science course. I'll have to check with them. But so R, the one that I say that we do focus on, this is a very simple coding language. If you can use Python, you can use R. And I think there's wrappers as well. So you can actually code R using Python if necessary. It's a nice language to pick up, I think, just because I say other people do use it. But if you have some background in coding, you can pick up R very quickly. Good.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question.
Okay, is there any other one who wants to ask a question? We still have plenty of time. Okay, so we actually have some questions from the chat box sent to us. So there's a question about in your research about micropersonality in animals, and how do you distinguish between a permanent behavior trait or the personality of the animal and a temporary reaction to the environmental changes when looking at the movement data?
Yeah, good question. So this was one of the pieces of work that I did that I skipped over very quickly. I'll get to in a second. And this was one of the data analysis. So this was an example of some research that I did with working very closely with biologists. So Andrew King here is a professor, I think now. He's a very good biologist in the University of Swansea, which is in Wales. And he's interested in behaviour. Now, in biology, there's a very specific meaning of kind of behavioral trait and something called plasticity. And what this essentially means is in animals, we find there's some behaviors that are repeated. So again, you must have seen, you'll have cats or dogs. You might have a cat or a dog that's very happy to go and explore new places. So if you take them somewhere new, they will go and run around and really explore everywhere. Or you might have a dog or a cat that's actually not that interested and they want to stay near you, near the place they feel safe. Again, it's the same in humans. We have some humans who are happy to go on holiday, go somewhere completely different on their own, go and talk to a lot of different people and be fine. And there's other people, like me, who would rather stay at home and stay by ourselves. Now, we classify those two things. We can classify those as different personality traits. So you've got one personality who's quite bold, who's happy to go and explore things, and you've got another personality where they're shy because they want to stay in the area in which they're comfortable with. And this isn't just in those types of just between boldness and shyness. There's other personality traits that you can identify in animals, and there's ways in which you can do it. You can do it by the way in which they explore a new area, the way in which they react to a predator, the way in which they interact with each other. And this is actually, we just think about it, this is very important because if I'm trying to, let's say, go fishing, and if I'm a biologist and I want to catch a lot of fish so that then I can do some experiments on them to see how they react to different things. If I know that there's a lot of fish that are bold, that are going to swim out, and they're the ones that are going to explore the area, well, they're the ones that I'm most likely to catch. And the ones that are shy, the ones that are going to keep themselves, keep near their home, I'm probably not going to catch them. So it does mean that when I'm doing experiments, even if I catch a big number of fish, chances are they are all of the same personality. So they all have this personality which we would classify as being bold. And then that means, well, that's a problem, because if I'm then trying to determine, if I'm trying to understand an entire species just from this captured group of fish, it turns out I'm only getting the bold ones and not the shy ones. So I can't really claim my results are universal for all these fish. So one problem we might want to have then is, can we identify easily, have I got a lot of bold fish, or have I got some shy fish, or have I got something in between? So we that's what we were looking at. Now, the previous way of doing this required taking an individual fish, putting them into an experimental tank, and then watching them and then determining if they're bold or shy. That takes a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of money. What we wanted to do is, as I said, watching and classifying movement is very easy and very cheap these days. I can put them all in a big tank, I can film them, and then I can analyze their movement. And then if I can use the movement to say if they're bold or shy, that will tell me how many fish I have of each individual personality. And then that will tell me whether I've got a good mix of fish or I've got a specific type of fish. So that's what we were looking at. So essentially what we did is we took a load of individual fish, we tracked their movement on their own, we changed the environment. So the environment either had 5 objects in, they were in a big fish tank, or it had 3 objects or 2 objects. And we just wanted to tell, look, just by changing this environment, is it possible for us to determine what personality of fish we have? And this is what we were looking at. And we measured certain things. So we measured the total distance they swam, how much they explored the tank, the amount of time they spent kind of away from the safety of the side of the tank, and the amount of time they spent near the objects. Because again, you can imagine if you're a fish, if there's an object in a tank, that's probably where you're going to feel safest. So you're going to spend some time there. If you're a bold fish, you might spend a bit of time there, but you'll spend more time swimming around, exploring everywhere else. So this was the behavioral parameters we measured. We then measured our movement parameters. These are things like our turning angles that I was discussing, the step lengths, how much time it didn't really move. I measured that as well. And something called the burst frequency, which was this idea of, again, you might have seen fish, they're all very still for a while, then they suddenly move. They move very quickly. So it was just measuring how often they did that. So again, you can imagine if you're quite a nervous person, then you might make a sudden movement quite a lot because you're getting scared quite quickly. So we measured these, and then we were trying to determine if by measuring these movement parameters, can I use them to equate to a behavioral parameter, which would tell me what personality of fish I've got. So the way in which we did that was we had to use some mixed effects models, and it got quite complicated quite quickly. You can have a look through the paper, that's the easiest thing to do. But essentially what we did was we were trying to identify whether or not there was a relationship between any of these movement parameters and these behavior parameters. The behavior ones classify whether it's shy or bold, and the movement is the thing that I can more readily and easily and non-invasively measure. And we did find that there was some correlation. Now, the mixed effects models was very important because we had repeated simulations. We had repeated experiments of the same fish, but we were doing it across different landscapes. So it had 2, 3, or 5 objects. So we had to take all of that into account to make sure that the changes in behavior were consistent. So that's the other thing with behavioral traits, they have to be consistent at the individual animal. So whatever we do, we expect the behavior not to change. And then there was a methodology in there that I took from, I can't remember the name of, I've got my paper here with me. No, I can dig it up, but there's a very specific approach that we use, which is similar to something called the ICC, the intercluster coefficient, I believe, which determines whether or not this group of individuals actually they are changing from one experiment to another, or all the group are doing essentially the same thing, which identifies that as a behavior. Yeah, so I hope that helps a little bit with that one. If you are interested, there is certainly more information in the appendix of that paper, I know that. And it will point you to the research by this, I can't remember the name of the researchers who came up with the specific analytical approach that we used in this paper. Yeah, I hope that answered that one as best I can. Any other questions?
Thank you for the answers, Dr. Bailey. Is there any other one who wants to ask questions? Because we still have some quiet time. Okay. Nura Sophie can ask her question.
Is it my voice clear enough?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for the time and opportunity. I'm quite interested in how this pattern of movement can indicate an illness of the animal. Maybe could you give us a simple illustration how this pattern of movement can indicate kind of illness, and what kind of illness is it? All type of illness uh we can identify from this pattern movement, or just kind of illness that affect the movement of the animal? Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Nifs. That's a very good question as well. So I'll answer a specific project that my PhD supervisor has worked on in a specific area, and then I'll talk more in general about other approaches I've seen. Just to recap, then the question was, is there any example we can give about how we can identify illness in animals just from their movement? And does it just have to be illnesses around movement, or can it be more in general other illnesses as well? So the first one I will highlight, so I've just gone back to this slide, is this lovely picture of a cow here. This cow wearing this collar. This collar is a tracking device. It is a GPS device. It also has an accelerometer. So the accelerometer tells us if it's suddenly moving up or down. Now, my supervisor worked on a big project where they attached these trackers to a lot of cows. And one of the things they were looking at was to identify when a cow is lame. Now, there is an official biological meaning of lame, but essentially you can think of it as if a cow has got a problem with one of their hooves, or with an internal illness, which means that they're not going to be producing as much milk. So these were dairy cows, so they produce milk. That's why they were being farmed. Now, there's often big herds of these dairy cows. The farmers are very good at identifying when a cow is acting ill, because they do act in different ways. They might isolate themselves from the herd. They might start, I think they can develop a bit of a hump in their back as well. So they do start looking and acting differently. However, the problem is it takes, by the time those identifying behaviors become visible, that's when the cow is already quite ill and they've been ill for time. So then when the farmer identifies that illness, they can call out a vet. The vet will come, check on the cow, and then if they do need to give some medical attention to the cow, they'll give some medicine to the cow. However, the cow can't then be milked because we have to wait for the medicine to go through the cow's system. So obviously we can't have any milk with that with that medicine in it as well. So it can take a long time for the cow to recover, which is bad for the cow. It can be expensive for the farmer because the farmer is having to call out vets every time it thinks someone is ill. And the cow might not be ill. The cow might just be behaving strangely. And also it costs the farmer more money because there is a period where the cow is not producing milk. And that's bad for the yield for the whole farm. And also, it's also bad for the herd, because cows are sociable animals. If the herd knows one of their friends, their members is ill, they behave differently because they are concerned about in the way animals work. That does have a knock-on effect, so that you can notice a different behavior in the whole herd if some of the individuals are not well. Essentially, it increases stress levels, and if you increase stress levels in cows, then that has an effect on their production of milk. So what my supervisor was interested in is, can they more quickly and readily identify when a cow is lame? So they put these trackers on a load of cows. They then recorded their movement across a long period of time. Whenever a cow was determined to be lame by a farmer saying, yes, I've identified this cow, it is lame, they isolated that period of movement behavior and then analyzed that compared to the rest of the time the cow was not lame. And by identifying those different behaviors, they were able to come up with a classification tree that essentially said, when an animal was wearing one of these trackers, it's recording data constantly. It has this algorithm, this classification tree running in the background, and whenever the behavior signals that it thinks it's lame, it sends an automatic signal to the farmer. The farmer can then go and explore more closely, and then call the vet out if necessary. And it was shown that this worked much more efficiently and quickly than the old way of just having a farmer look occasionally to see if the cow is lame. And that did just come through. It's the movement behavior as well as the accelerometer behavior, which essentially showed when the cow was moving its head up and down. So we had how it was moving around the barn and around the field and how it was moving its head up and down. And that was enough information to identify that the cow might potentially need some medical assistance and do that quicker and earlier. And I believe that's been produced, that's been rolled out, and that is now being used to help farmers identify. And more widely, there's other behaviours that's used. So again, if you've got one of your apps on your phone that might be a health app that says you need to walk more, or maybe there's a problem because your heart rate has become quite elevated for a long time. I was working on something to do with this. I was working on a piece of work to do with people who jog, who are runners. So if they want doing a lot of running, we wanted to try and identify any behaviors or signals which would tell the runner that they might get an injury soon. So some injuries don't happen on all of a sudden, they build up slowly over time. So you might have an inflammation in one of your joints or one of your ankles, and that builds up slowly over time. And actually what you can show is there is a difference in the way in which you literally run, the way in which you're moving, the amount of pressure you put on your joints, the speed in which you're running, how quickly you can make turns without the individual knowing that they are running differently, and they're doing that because their body is actually telling them there's a problem with one of their joints. So we looked through some information, just some very top line information about to do with distance covered, to do with speed, to do with burst frequencies, how quickly they suddenly increase and decrease speed. And just from that, we could identify or give the runner a warning that we think they might potentially have an injury on the way, so they need to prepare for that, or they need to, decrease their activity, or maybe do some more gentle activity for a while before increasing back to what they were doing before. And then there's lots of other processes like that as well. You can tie in more additional information. So not just movement, like I say, you can tie in heart rate, you can tie in diet, you can tie in amount of time, how well you're sleeping. So sleep is obviously a very big factor in how and if we understand people's sleep patterns are being disturbed because they're moving around more, again, it's a slightly different type of movement, but it's still movement patterns that we can pick up. That all indicates that there is a change in behavior, and a change in behavior happens for a reason. If that change in behavior isn't externally driven, as in there's a change in your environment, then there's an internal reason for that change of behavior, and that's when we're trying to identify. And there's lots of other things as well. It's a really big area. So health data is a massive area for data analysis, for data research, specifically understanding movement, because again, everything and everyone moves, is therefore a very big part of that. So there's lots of information and lots of things you can do purely just from tying in health data along with this movement data. Cheers.
Very clear. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the question.
Okay, thank you, Nur Sophie. So we have another question on the chat box. So I will read it. I just got a Grange Joe, very nice and inspiring talk you gave. I just got a question from students. Was hoping that could, they're too shy to ask. So the first question is, can people who aren't very strong in statistics still get into data science? Well, this one and many others might need some motivation booster to pursue study in data science. And the second one is, how is data science applied in the fields of history and politics? Are computational skills For example, coding still required in those fields. And the third one is, do you think data science is a secure job for us in the future? With all the technology advancement, especially AI, do you think that this role could be taken over or replaced by AI?
Excellent. So, yeah, lots of good questions again there. And it's nice to hear that people are thinking of the future and of careers and what they can do. Right. So I think the first question, and actually I can see it here, so that's handy. So just to reiterate, so can people who aren't very strong in statistics still get into data science? Yes, very much yes. Sorry, as I tried to say at the beginning, there are different approaches to data science. Data science is such a big field that it isn't the case that you have to study this, this, and this to be called a data scientist. You can do lots of different routes into becoming a data science. We, as a university, oh no, I'll find the slide later. I'll just talk. It's okay. Understanding the statistics and the mathematics does help because you'll be doing a lot of analysis on data. So you'll be running some linear models or something, or running some machine learning methods, and you need to know what the results are telling you, and also, what assumptions. How do you know to do that machine learning approach? How do you know to use a random forest rather than logistic regression? Some of those basic things. So you need to be a bit of statistics background. However, you don't need to be an expert in statistics. You just need to be able to understand the topics, the techniques that you are using. And as I say, there's two main ways for understanding that. One is fine, go off and do a lot of statistics and be very good. The other is to work with data, to understand what you're trying to get out of the data, to understand what the results are and how they're useful. I did that second approach. And to me, that was the much more useful one, because when you're working with it and you're using your computer, your programming skills, you'll be able to understand the outcome. Also, just remember, just as there isn't one type of data science degree, there isn't one type of data science job. Some people will say, I want a data scientist, and they want people to be able to focus on the programming skills, on handling data, storing data, retrieving data. Some people will say they want a data scientist to actually focus more on data analysis, which would be requiring some statistics. Some people would say they want a data scientist and they want a machine learning programmer or a machine learning engineer. It varies from job to job. So there is such a wide range available for people with data science skills that you don't need to worry too much if your statistics isn't the strongest, just as long as I say is you're happy and you understand the approaches and the techniques you're using, you'll be fine. There's also boosters are always a good idea. There's always other courses you can do. So just like I said around here, somewhere we have different degrees that require some type of data analysis. And in here, there might be individual modules that will just cover specific types of statistics or specific approaches they need. There's always online courses as well if you want. I think when it comes to showing off your skills for careers and for jobs as well, that's exactly what you do. You show off your skills, you show off what you're good at. If you know there's an area you think isn't your strongest, then you can take a course, take a module, go online, go on to LinkedIn Learning or Google or something, do a quick little course, and then you explain that. So during interviews and jobs careers, you can say, look, this is the additional stuff you've done. But yes, data science is such a big field that you'll be fine if your statistics isn't your favorite. How is data science applied to fields of politics or history, computational coding skills? Yes. So still, let me minimize that chat because I think. Okay, sorry everyone, because I forgot I had that up. History and politics. Where's my slide with that? Government politics. There we go. Whilst statistics is needed for it, also the programming and the general data analysis is very, very important as well. It's how you clean data, how you understand data, how you store data, how you access the data in the first place is very important. So anything to do with government, there is always data. There's data stored in loads of separate places. One of the big things I'm working with some students we have actually over at the moment from who are visiting with us for a few weeks. We're just about to focus purely on doing something called data fusion. So that's where you have disparate different data sets stored in different places in different formats that you need to put together to create one understandable big data set. That is a lot of what needs to be happening in government, and certainly in politics, because there's lots of different places that are storing data in different ways. So it could be a JSON file, it could be a CSV, it could be a PDF. They need someone to be able to untangle all those different data sets and store them together. And they need someone to be able to access it. They need people to understand how you can ethically store data, how you can securely store data. Government and politics, securing data is very important. So the analysis is very important, but all the other coding side of things, computer side, is equally as important. In fact, arguably maybe even more important, because if you can't store the data, you can't access it, you can't analyze it. And then again, so these are all UK focused maybe, but there are plenty of jobs and careers that require those skills. And in terms of when I talk about history, again, it depends what you mean by history. Actually, a big thing now in history is trying to maybe digitize a lot of documentation. So digitize a lot of historical data. And again, when you're doing that, then you're talking about being able to understand image recognition, handwriting recognition, your computational linguistics, so LLM type stuff will come into it as well. So again, all those techniques are very much needed and required, even though they're more on the computer science and not the statistics side. And then finally, I think it was, do I think it's safe in the world of AI? It's hard to answer. I'm more optimistic. I think yes, AI is a tool. It's AI doesn't know. I know people are saying the next level is when you get generative AI and AI that can essentially start thinking for itself. It still needs people to tell it what we need it to do, what we want it to do. It can't determine. Yeah, there is still plenty. It will become something just like computers, just like Google at the moment is, where we use that as we are so used to using it, it's embedded in our life and it makes our life easier. AI will do something maybe similar as far as I'm concerned. And it just means the skills we will use, the way in which we interact with things daily might change, but we will still need people who can understand it, and arguably even more so. It might be better at running the analysis for us, but it's not going to be better at understanding what analysis we want to run, what we're trying to get out of this, what our manager's asking us to do, and how we're going to present those findings. And also whether or not the analysis is correct is the other thing, or if there is a better way that we want to do something. So yes, it's a tricky time, but equally, yeah, I think certainly for the next 30, 40 years, I think we'll be all right with it as a career path. It might just change.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bailey. I think we have one more slot for a question. Is there anyone who wants to ask? Okay, Cecilia?
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. Good afternoon, sir. My name is Cecilia Purnakunawan. So I would like to ask a questions about as data science and AI become increasingly influential in behavioral research, how does the University of Essex ensure that students not only develop strong technical and mathematical skills, but also critical thinking skills to interpret data responsibly and avoid drawing misleading conclusions from complex behavioral patterns? So that's all about my questions. Thank you.
Excellent. That's another very good question. So yes, so how does the University of Essex, how do we make sure that we help our students? I think I'll answer that maybe in a couple of different ways. So first of all, on the AI question, we are very aware as a university, as all universities are, about AI. Now, we don't shy away from it. there's no point us telling our students not to use it ever, because students will be using it. We also actually find that we have a lot of students who come to us to do master's degrees, whose managers and bosses tell them to use AI. Certainly, if you're writing an email or if you're writing a report, why should you spend hours doing that if you can get AI to write you something quickly and you can then use that? So instead, what we do is we try and embed correct use of AI within some of our modules. So when we're doing project challenges, maybe when we're talking about doing capstone projects or some of the later modules that you study, we encourage the use of AI, but to use it correctly, as in it's a research tool. So just like I would Google something, then I would read these websites and determine what's useful for me, what isn't. And maybe if I don't understand it, I will then Google that term and do it again. With AI, we do the similar thing, where you can use AI to maybe ask a question about what you should look into. Can they give you an example of something? Where should you go for that example? And then we teach you how to go off and find that example and maybe ask some AI some further questions. Equally, we've been using spell check and grammar check for years, so it's no harm to ask AI to maybe ask to neaten up something you've been writing. But again, it's then making sure that students don't just copy paste that. You have to make sure you understand what it is that they have written, what you've got from AI, and then understand how you can edit it to make it make more sense for you, how you can change it to make it clear that you understand how what everything has been written and produced. It's also used a lot in coding now, and I think again in some of the coding modules, if it can produce some code for you quickly and simply, that's not a bad thing to do, but you need to be able to then identify what's going on in that code, how you can change that code, and also how you can check the code is correct. So again, it's a tool. In the coding situation, again, I don't write all my code from scratch all the time because other people have written code for me to help analyze something. So I might take the code that this colleague has written, but I then still expect me to be able to identify everything about that code, check that it's running right, because my colleague may have made a mistake. So I go through that. So that's similar now to how we include AI. But we are also keen in some cases where we need to make sure that students aren't using AI as essentially as a tool to answer questions instead of them answering them. So through that, we have different ways of assessing students. We have a lot of exams still. So it's closed book exam where you don't have access to computers, so you can't use AI. We encourage the use of projects and presentations so that we know if the students understand what they've written and what they've given to us. Some modules, for example, so in my module, I teach calculus, which is a first year module. We give students time to actually repeat homeworks. So you can do a homework once, you get your mark instantly, and then you can do it again with different questions. But that means you allow yourself to learn and to teach yourself as you're taking this again and again. But it is a big problem. But what we will find, and what you always find with this, is anyone who just uses AI to benefit them whilst they're at university, you're going to quickly be found out when you go to an interview for a job, because it will be clear you don't know the answers to a lot of the questions that you claim you do. And even if you get a job, you'll then be in trouble because it'll be clear you can't answer a lot of the questions or you can't do your work unless you have access to an AI bot. And that's not what managers want. Managers know what AI can and can't do. They need a person who's there to be able to either correctly use AI or to be able to interpret and present their results. So what we end up doing is we complement the use of an existence of AI in our teaching in all of our modules. And just quickly then on the ethics of it and how you can correctly use it, we do have specific modules where we talk about the ethics of data science and the ethics of using data and using AIs as well. Because don't forget, these are big things that spew out a lot of energy just to answer questions. So we do have to think about ethically using data science and ethically using AI. But like I say, it's here to stay. So we have to make sure we embed it within our teaching, just as we embedded calculators, the internet, Google. This is the next thing where we just have to understand how to embed. Yes. Did that help? Sorry, was that okay, Cecilia?
Yes. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Cecilia. And I think we have one last question before we wrap up. Loresa?
Thank you for the opportunity. So, I want to ask that I'm actually planning to pursue a double degree at the University of Essex. And I'm curious, are there any research opportunities for students who are interested in applying data science to real-world problems?
Thank you, Raisa. That's good to hear. Can I just ask, would that be an undergraduate degree? Would you be coming to Essex to study your undergraduate? So bachelor's. Yes. Okay, good. That's fine. Yep. So the way in which when we could look to do is in your capstone project. So the capstone project is, as I say, it's an individual project that you study alongside a lecturer. We send out a big list of potential projects, and there's some projects there that are very much research focused. So it might be aligning with, let's say, my research interest. I might have some data from some colleague that I would like to be analysed. So someone could work on that. We do have some projects that are given to us by our industry links. So we might have some companies that are based nearby, and they said this is a problem that they would like to be worked on by a student and a member of staff, and you can work on that problem. We've had students work with companies, so the Essex, the County Council, we've had quite a few through that. We've had companies from who are data analyst companies. We have lots of different companies. I think we've had the police as well. So the police force have worked with us on some problems. Now, that depends, that varies. So one year we might have lots of these projects, another year we might not have many. But normally with the project is you speak to a supervisor, you can tell a supervisor what you're interested in, and they might be able to come up with a project talking with you that you would like to work on as well. And if you'd really like to focus on some specific industry link or specific data set from a specific field or area, or maybe you'll just be interested in working on a topic which is related to the research of that lecturer, so to do with my research, then you'd speak to the lecturer and they'll come to an agreement and you could work on that. So that does give you that gives you an introduction into either an industry-based problem or research. So if you're then interested in doing a master's degree or research degree after that, you can then use that knowledge within your application and within the actual degree, your follow-on degree as well. So you do have the opportunity to apply your skills to either further research or some actual real-world industry-based problems, which is important, which I think is a nice thing for students to be able to do.
Answer your question, Raisa?
I'm sorry, I cannot quite hear the question. Can you please repeat that?
No, was the answer from Dr. Bailey answered your question?
Oh, yeah. It is already answered my question. Thank you so much.
Okay,
Good,
lovely.
thank you.
Okay, thank you. So due to the time crunch and according to the schedule, we have to conclude the Q&A session today. So we are wrapping for today's agenda. However, let's do a photo session first. So we encourage you guys to open up your camera and use the VBG, the virtual background available. So for while we're waiting for everyone to open up their cameras, for the committee in charge, you may take over. Okay. Okay, we'll begin for the first slide. 1, 2, 3. Okay, for the second slide. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. For the third slide, I think, yeah. For the third slide is 1, 2, 3. Yeah. And I think that's it for the sessions. So before we wrap up the Zoom, we have some words from Dr. Sapi before we leave the Zoom.
Thank you, Fia. So yeah, we are going to wrap up this meeting. Thank you so much, Joe. I was the one who emailed you earlier, sending you the virtual background. Finally.
Yeah. Thank you for doing that. I managed to just about get it working, I think. So that's good. It was my first time of putting a background in, so I'm glad it worked.
Oh, well. It's nice. It's a little bit flipped, but that's okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you're fine. But then, so yeah, Joe, I was a little bit, not a little bit. It's very interesting to hear your talk. There also, what's one thing that is interesting is that we have a lot of overlap in our curriculum. So that's really great. That's why the hopefully the double degree between our international students in Department of Statistics could go a long time. Yeah, Raisa is one of our students who is planning to go to University of Essex next year, hopefully, with undergrad degree for 2 semesters. So hopefully everything will run well for Raisa and for any international students in the Department of Statistics who are also planning to pursue double degree in University of Essex. That would be also great to plan very early. Yeah. And also, Joe, I would also like to introduce you that we are also joined by 20 students from University Technology Malaysia who are present in the our classroom. Oh, they are waving their hands.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Hello.
They've been with us for almost a week now. Someone is sending you a love, very big. So yeah, thank you so much, guys, and thank you so much, you. Hopefully, we can see you in person in near future.
Yes, that would be lovely. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to any students who come to Essex to meeting them. And I'll be happy for a trip to visit sometime. I've never been. Oh well, no, I've never been quite that far, so that would be exciting. I would happily visit. I'm sure that would be a lovely place to be. I've heard very good things, so that would be interesting.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So yeah, let's conclude the online meeting. Thank you so much, you. Thank you so much, everyone who's been joining with us since 2 hours ago. Thank you. Good day, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you,
so much,
Joe.
Sophie. Thank you,
Yeah,
Pak
see you
Dedi.
later. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Have a
Bye-bye.
good day.
Bye.
Bye.
So leave meeting. Sudah.